Hi everyone, Dana here. I just recorded a 55-minute video on this presentation and found out that the sound wasn't on. Yay! So now I get to redo it. This is a presentation. This is for Module 7 in the class, Introduction to Nonprofits, and we are going to talk about marketing and communications, partnerships, and fundraising. As I said at the beginning of this module, this is the area where I have spent most of my career in this area. So it means a lot to me, and it's hard for me to not go too far into the woods. So I'm going to try to keep it really simple just because this is an introduction. So I'm going to just touch on everything and we'll get you through. So this might be about an hour long, and make sure to take breaks if you need to, rewind, watch it again if you need to, and we'll get through it all. All right, here we go. All right, so marketing, communications, partnerships, and fundraising. I want to take you back to this pyramid that I showed you in an earlier module. We have talked about a lot of these different elements in terms of best practices for nonprofits. Fundraising, partners, public relations, you can see where those are. I've got them circled there. These are external. These are things that you want to, a lot of times people will say this is the outward facing or the public facing part of the organization. It means this is the part that everybody can see, all right? Your website, it's your messaging, it's all of those different things. It's the stuff that the public sees. It's not the internal stuff. All right. So let's talk marketing and communications or public relations or whatever you want to call it. Really what we're going to go over, so these next few slides, I'm just going to be telling you what's going to be involved in the next, 45 minutes or so. So the first thing we're going to talk about is marketing and communications, public relations, any of that stuff that however you want to describe all of that. We're only going to talk about the basics. So identifying your publics, figuring out your branding, building a case statement, your website, social media. Now you can get more advanced than that, and then you can get super duper. You can get it as advanced as you want to get in this. I want to just stick to the basics in this. So I'm not really going to talk about those topics on the right. We're going to talk about partnerships, 3 different types of partnerships: referral partnerships, collaborative partnerships, and leveraging partners. We're going to talk about fundraising. So this would be annual giving, major gifts, capital campaigns, events, peer-to-peer, corporate gifts, foundation grants, and planned giving. We're going to talk about all of those. So marketing and communications. This is the first section of the lecture and what we're going to discuss. Here are those basics. So this looks familiar, right? I told you we're not really going to talk about those things that are over there on the right-hand side. We're going to stick to the basics. So here are the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about identifying your publics. I'm going to talk about what that means. Developing your logo and your branding. Building a case statement. Your website and social media. All right. Identifying your publics. Oh, I just kind of said all of this. Let me go through. All right, identify your publics. You want to identify at least a few publics to start with, and I'm going to ask that you do that this week. Here's everything you need to answer about them. You know, it's the who, what, when, where, how, and why of each one of these publics. Now, when I talk about a public or an audience, what I'm talking about is just a category of people, and you want to try to be as specific as you can about them. So maybe it is your clients, maybe it's your potential clients, maybe it's your donors, potential donors, the volunteers, employees, partner organizations, grantors. It could be anything any category of people that you are trying to communicate with. And sometimes certain people might be in 2 or 3 different categories. That's normal and that's fine. But you need to think about, as you identify each of these different groups, what is it that you want from them? Do you want them to use your services? Do you want them to give you money? Do you want them to support you in some other way? Do you want them to work for you? And then what is it that they need that you can provide, right? This is the why. Why would they care about you? Is it because they want to change the world? Is it because they have a need that you can fulfill? whatever it is. It's why they need you. And then how do you want them to respond? Sending a message to someone without any kind of expectation of response is a waste of time. You want people to do something, to react in some way after hearing your messages. That is called the call to action. So when you watch a TV commercial and it's like, have you been a victim of blah, blah, blah? Call this number now. That's the call to action, okay? They are giving you information and they're saying, now that you have this information, here's what we're asking you to do. So that's the call to action. Then what's the best way for you to reach that audience? Okay, every audience may have a different way of being reached. If you are serving if you're serving a small group of Afghanistan refugees for your nonprofit, then putting out a bunch of literature in Spanish is clearly not going to reach your target market, is it? Absolutely not. So you've got to decide what your target market is and the best way to reach them. If you are looking to recruit volunteers for your organization and your target market for that is, let's say it's a middle-aged people who maybe have time on their hands to volunteer, you're not going to try to advertise or communicate with them via TikTok. It's probably going to be through Facebook or email or something that people in that audience use. All right. This is a big problem that I hear from people is they say, who is your target audience? Everyone. I want everyone in the world to know who we are. Okay, well, Coca-Cola spends billions of dollars every year on advertising all over the world in the hopes that everyone in the world will know who they are. And I promise you, maybe almost everyone in the world knows who they are, but there are still people who don't know what Coke is. So unless you're prepared to spend billions or trillions of dollars, you are not going to reach everyone. So don't waste your time, don't waste your money or other resources. Target who you want to reach. And here is how you would do it. So here is a little grid. Now I've simplified this because this can be as complicated as it needs to be. So again, I'm simplifying it. You identify your audience, and here are all the things I talked about before. What is it that you need from them? What is it that they need from you? What action do you want them to take? And what's the best way to reach them? And that would really mean like the medium is what you would call that. So you would list each one of them. So let's say I'm using the example, a made-up example of maybe a nonprofit grief counseling center that provides grief counseling for people who have suffered a loss, and they do it for free or for very low cost. So maybe your current clients would be an audience. So what is it that you want them to do? You want them to stay in counseling, and you want them to tell others about the services that you provide. And what is it that they need? They need encouragement. They need to feel hope for the future, and they need somebody to remove barriers to services. Barriers might be money. It might be transportation. It might be language. So they need to have those barriers removed. What action do you want them to take? Well, you want them to keep their appointment. You want them to refer you to other people. You want them to keep coming back, so forth. How are you going to reach them? Well, maybe it's emails. Maybe it's communications with their counselor, flyers in the clinic, Facebook, phone. There are lots of different ways that you could reach them. Then you go through for each audience and think about what it is that you need from them. Potential clients, potential board members, potential donors, partner organizations. Every one of them has something different. This is going to look different for a lot of them. Now, you may have a Facebook post that appeals to both current clients and potential clients. That's perfectly fine, but you got to kind of know what that is. So we're gonna talk more in depth about that, but I want you to understand this. This is just part of building the plan. All right, let's talk about branding. Branding is really just it just really means how what you are presenting to the entire world. So it's everything from the way that somebody answers your phone, the way your website looks, the way your logo looks, the way that you perform the work that you do, the words that you say, the words that you write. All of those things are your brand, and your brand affects what people think about you. So you need to be intentional in deciding what you want your brand to be. You need to build. Now, let me say this first. We have already talked about your mission and your vision, and you've already set those, right? You know what your mission is. You know what your vision is for your nonprofit. So this is really just the next step. So based on what you've decided you want it to be, maybe you need to build a logo. Logos do not have to be fantastic. I would avoid them being cutesy just because that gets old after a while. But go ahead and build a logo. If you don't use Canva, check it out, canva.com. You can get a free, there's a free version of it. I use Canva every single day in my work because it's so user-friendly. There are things you can do. I think it even has a logo builder in it where you can just create a logo. You can do whatever you want. So you don't have to hire a great big advertising firm to do a logo for you. You can just create your own. You also want to decide on what colors you want, what words you want, any adjectives and adverbs, culture and attitude. What you see on the right there is what I call a brand board, and it has all of the information about your brand that you want. Now, obviously not all of the information. There are things like culture and so forth that aren't in here, but this is a great thing to keep at your fingertips. I have this, I keep it right here in my drawer for all of our things. So whether we're working on a proposal to a new client or we're doing our website or our Facebook page, I use all of these guidelines for Sharpshooter Communications, which is my company. So this is my branding board. I have our logo, I have our mission statement, I have our tagline in there, I have all of our colors, our color palette that we use on everything. I have the different fonts that we use when we're doing things, and then I have feeling words. So what we want to convey to the people that we work with is that we are trustworthy, we're competent, we're organized, we're friendly, we're honest, we are experts, we're customer-centered, we're modern, we're experienced, we're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're respectful, professional, gracious, and generous. And that is my brand. That is what I want people to perceive of me. And if people are not perceiving those things, then I'm doing something wrong. By the way, you can take a look at my brand board. I've got a link here, and I'll put it in the presentation as well if it's something you want to look at. I actually have a second page to this, maybe even a third, where I have different photos that we use in our business. All right, let's move on to the case statement. After you have your logo and your branding and all of that, go ahead and start building your case statement. What is that? Well, it's a brief document that describes the organization, the problem it seeks to solve, its program successes, whether that's real or hypothetical, resources needed, and strategic vision. This can be a document, a video, a website. It can be whatever you want as long as it gives a message. A few years ago, pre-COVID, I had an idea to begin a shared workspace for nonprofits. And that would work a lot like those incubators for entrepreneurs, except it would just be for nonprofits. To have that in Tulsa, because we don't have one here in Tulsa. So I actually put together a case statement for that, and since it was a startup and I was really just pitching it, obviously there was no organization behind it. It was just me pitching an idea. Kind of started getting some traction for it, and then COVID hit, and it's just sort of been languishing ever since. But I want to show you the case statement I did for that, just so you see it's pretty broad. It's not super specific. I did this on it's just a PowerPoint. And I did concept overview in March 2020, right before everything shut down. So here's the problem. Now, normally you're going to talk a little bit about your history, like your mission and your board and how long you've been doing things and so forth. But since this wasn't an organization, none of that was included. I just started with the problem statement, is that Tulsa has 2,400 nonprofit organizations generating $4 billion a year. So we know that shared services and shared workspace is a proven strategy to reduce costs and increase outcomes. But Tulsa doesn't really have that. And so this proposal will solve that problem. I put down innovation as a relative term. The first few times I talked to people about this, they would say, oh my gosh, that's just so innovative. What you're talking about is so innovative. Well, it's not really innovative because there are 600 of these type organizations around the country. So no, it's really not innovative. It's just innovative for Tulsa because we don't have one. So, but the ones around the country, they work. The people who work there say that it saves them money and they're happier and they like it, yada, yada, yada. Talked a little bit about partnerships and the problem with partnerships. And this relates a little bit to what we're going to be talking about, but there are different types of partnerships that don't always work well. Forced collaboration, and if you work in a nonprofit long enough, you're going to be forced into doing collaboration. So a lot of times a funder will say, I'm going to give each organization $10,000, but I want you to work together to solve this problem. If you ever got forced into a group project at work, you know how well these work. Then proximity, meaning just because you work next door to each other doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to become partners and enjoy working together. So it's got to be a combination of just some natural, organic ways for you to work together. And then once you trust each other, then you're more willing to partner. This is my model for change. This is a little hypothetical, but it's built on some research that was done by some folks. And when you start talking to funders, they start wanting to see diagrams and different things like that. So that's really what this is. I wouldn't worry about it if I were you, but it's just to show that all of this has been thought through. But here's how I was saying that the shared workspace would work. Nonprofit organizations would be able to have office space, either dedicated office space or just general office space, and they would pay a below market rate rent for that. And then in addition, they would get shared services. So copiers, fax machines, a post office, all of those different things that they normally have to pay for on their own, they would have shared services for that. Then the space would also be available for for-profits. So it would be two types of for-profits. So you could have a for-profit company that, like mine, like Sharpshooter Communications, that serves nonprofits, and they could office there. They would have to pay market rate. And in exchange for being able to be there among all of these great potential clients, they have to agree to do education or to do free coaching or do something like that every month. Then you could just open it to the general public as well for meeting space or event space, different things like that. It would just be a way of raising money. So if you've got a really cool space and you open it up for a cocktail party or something like that, that people can rent it out, then hey, that works great. And then I put together the estimated budget. Now you guys know about that, right? And how you get to the budget, because we did that last week. And I did exactly what I told you guys to do. I went and looked at other organizations that were somewhat similar, and I looked to see what their expenses were. And then I really thought it through, and I jotted down every category. So I have all of those different, and this is just sort of the summary of it, because I have all of these broken down very specifically as well. So I figured out that with a $2 million startup campaign, and you'll notice I call it a capital campaign, so remember that for later. The project should be self-sustaining within 6 years. And then, well, then I just have my contact. So it's like, how do you, again, here's the call to action. Do you have questions? Well, here is my contact information. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. So that is an example of a case statement. So you can do a case statement. You need to do a case statement for your entire organization. All right, here's our organization. Here's who we are. Here's what we do. If you have different programs, you need to do a case statement for each one of those programs as you have time. For now, you just need to worry about doing an overall case statement. So let's say you're a homeless shelter that also has a program where you have like a small health clinic. Maybe you partner with a healthcare organization that comes in and provides healthcare for your clients. So maybe that's a special program that you have, and so you do a case statement for that program as well as for the overall organization, all right? Then you're going to want to build a website. Now, you will have people tell you that today, in today's world, you don't really need to build a website. You need to just have a Facebook page. I disagree with that. I think that people do still first Google and look for a website. So I personally think it is important to have a website that people can go to that is dedicated. I always recommend that you start small, keep it simple, and get more complex as you go along. So even if it's just a one-page website, great. Just have something there. Here's what you have to do a website. And I always get these things confused, so this is for me as much as you. First thing that you need to do is buy a domain, and that means you are just reserving the name. So let's compare this to buying a house, all right? If your website were a house, when you purchase the domain, that's like you're purchasing the land, the address, right? So you are purchasing this piece of land where a house is going to be. Or maybe there's a house sort of already there, but let's just say you're buying the address. So you're buying the piece of land. That's all you're doing. There are lots of different places that you can do that. You're going to want to buy it as soon as you decide on a name. So, and it needs to make sense, right? Then you have to get a host. So the website host is like the house and all of the decorations that are inside the house. So you're going to buy a host, which a lot of times that's Wix or whatever it is, and they give you the program where you're literally going to build your page, and you're going to put it in your domain, right? The domain is your property. So you build your house on your property. And then each page in your website is sort of like a different room in your house. All right, the landing page would be like your living room, where everybody walks in, the first thing they see is your living room. So make sure and get your living room in order. And what you want to avoid doing is having a little sign like this at the bottom about a page is under construction. Because really what you're doing then is you're inviting people into your house when it's not ready to see people. You don't want to do that. That's not part of your brand. So don't build extra pages. Don't build extra rooms until you're ready to put things in them. And then you can open them up. So have them completely built before you even put them on your website. Again, start simple and get more complex over time. Here is another cautionary tale. I'm going to tell you, there's all kinds of horror stories, but I've had these literally happen to clients of mine. If you hire outside help for your website, and a lot of people do it because they don't have the time, they don't have the skill, and they're not confident about doing it. So maybe they have a friend, they have a cousin, they have a client who does that for them. You have to make sure that you retain ownership and control of your website at any time. Even if you don't know how to get into your domain and you don't even know how to get into your host, you have to, even if it's just in a notebook or a file or something, you've got to have all the passwords, you've got to have all the access, you've got to make sure that the hosting service knows that you own that website. Here's what has happened to clients of mine. They will hire an outside firm to do it, and then the owner of that firm suddenly dies and the firm closes down, and they're left with a domain that's out there, that's their name, the abcnonprofit.com or .org, and they can't use it. And they can't go reserve it because they've already reserved it for 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is. So they're stuck. There's nothing they can do. Another situation that we had was a client of mine that does workforce development for people coming out of prison. And so they thought it would be great, and it makes perfect sense that they had a client actually do their website for them. Unfortunately, this gentleman started using drugs again, kind of spiraled out of control, and basically held them hostage and said that they had to pay him $10,000 or he was going to erase their entire website. They were held hostage. So those are horror stories of when people have completely turned over control. Don't do that. The next thing I want to tell you about your website is analytics. I suddenly can't talk. Analytics. So when you build your website, either on the website your host, right? They will, a lot of times they will offer you tools that you can put into your website that will help you with analytics, or you can go to Google Analytics. You can make these analytics as complex as you want them to. Again, I would start small, go from and move forward. Maybe you just want to know how many people have visited your website. Maybe you want to know how many people clicked on something after they visited your website, or how many of them took that call to action, filled out a contact form, whatever it is. Decide what it is that you want to measure. And then using the analytics, go ahead and measure that and look at it every month. We're going to talk a little more about that. Okay, social media. I'm going to say the same thing about this as I did with the websites. Go slowly and make it more complex over time. Don't jump in. The very worst thing you can do is sign on to 10 social media sites and think you're going to do them all at the same time, because after all, they're free. Well, social media is not free. It might be free for you to set up an account on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, but the amount of time and energy and resources that it takes you to manage those sites is not free. Time is your most important asset that you have, because you cannot make more of it. You can always make more money. You can never make more time. So think about your time as an expense and as a cost. So social media is not free. You want to choose one platform that you're comfortable with and that will appeal to your target audience. So maybe, what's the newest one? Discord. Maybe Discord is the platform that you love. You're super duper comfortable with it, but no one in your target population even knows what that is. That's clearly not the one you want to use. But if you can pick Facebook or Instagram or something that you know your target market is going to use, pick it. Get very comfortable with it. Make sure you've mastered that and that you've got a really good reputation, and then take on the next one. Once you got that, take on the next one. Don't try to do everything at once. You need to develop a calendar and pillars. So when we talk about pillars, that just means look at every audience that you have and decide what are the things that are going to appeal to them, and then build messages around that. We do have clients that we work with them on doing a social media strategy, and this is what we do is, build a calendar. So here's all your different target markets. Maybe they have 12 different ones. And so every Tuesday, you're going to do a post that relates to your current clients. So what kinds of things would they want to know? Well, I don't know, here's a new program that we're doing, or here's a client that we served who had a great outcome. So you want to just build those and then just calendar them like that, and try to do a couple months worth of posts, just planning them ahead of time so you know what to do. And then now it has gotten so complicated. Like Facebook, for example, is just ridiculously complicated. Keep it simple, because they will try to complicate it for you because they want you to go out and buy services from someone. All right. Social media, you also need to put one person in charge. I'm going to say it again. One person in charge. That doesn't mean that they have to do everything. It just means that they are in charge. I promise you, about half of you, if you ever go out and you start a nonprofit organization, you're going to fall into the trap of just saying, it's okay, we'll just take care of it when we take care of it. Somebody will post. Anybody, if you feel like posting, if you think about posting, just post it. No, don't do it. It happens all the time. It's a disaster. One person needs to be in charge of posting everything, and then all posts need to be reviewed before they go public. You cannot pull stuff back, all right? Once you chop down a tree, it's chopped down, and I don't even need to give you all the scenarios of people who posted things on social media that they can never, ever take back. Make sure you review it before it gets posted. Then again, you want to monitor your analytics. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Monitoring your analytics means evaluating what you've done. You want to determine your KPIs. Pick up your pen, type this in, do whatever. This is going to be on the quiz. What is a KPI? It is a key performance indicator. It is one of those things that determines how well you're doing. You get to decide what those are. Now, you can pick really crappy ones, but you get to decide what they are. Here at Sharpshooter, we have our KPIs are things like how many visits did we get to our website? How long did people spend on average on our website? How many clicks did they do on our website? And we look at those every month and we compare month to month. Same thing with social media. How many likes, how many follows, how many clicks? We look at all of that data. You've got to set some targets and some goals. And so let's say in 3 months, we want to be here. In 6 months, we want to be there. You got to check them month. And like I said, we do it regularly. We check them once a month, go through them. I've got it. Today is the first day of the month, so I've got to go through and look at all of that. And so you got to check them and see where you're going. Sometimes you notice things sort of, maybe they're going upwards, up, and then suddenly they just sort of level off or even go down. Well, that means you got to start over, maybe refreshing what you do. And then you've always got to celebrate when you can because it feels really good when you reach one of your goals. So make sure you celebrate. Okay, next section, we're going to talk about partnerships. I'm going to pause, I'm going to get a drink of water, and then I'm going to continue.